Bubs in the house.
Hey, how you doing, Mike?
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. We will be starting here shortly. This is Captain Rebby. I have a great panel of people for you today. As you're coming on board, welcome. If you have questions, use the Q&A, and then we'll start at the top of the hour, and I'll go through the instructions. All right, good afternoon from Washington, D.C. I am Captain Amanda Rebby, and I'll be kicking off this meeting, but I have some expert phase 2 execution managers, Vanessa Perner and Mike Williams, who are on the call, as well as Ray Kahn. So they are your experts and will be assisting me with this week's presentation. So let me pull up the slides. And then we will turn off our cameras so you are not distracted. And can everybody see the main slide here?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, I'm gonna turn my camera off. And let's get this started. So this week's webinar is about phase 2s, everything that you need to know if you are interested in submitting a phase 2, if you're a phase 1 company wanting to go to phase 2, or if you are in phase 2 and you just want to learn a little bit more, this is the webinar for you. So we have essentially 3 different topics here, but there's a lot to unpack. So first, we're going to talk about TPOCs, and then that customer MOU, and then the execution side of invoicing and deliverables. So phase 2, for those of you who are not aware, what does this mean? Essentially, this is a continuation of R&D efforts from a completed phase 1, or the other option is a direct to phase 2 award where the proposal and the small business already has technical feasibility, and the key is that they have a government, customer, and end user. So the phase 2 objective here is to validate the fit between the non-defense commercial product and the Air Force market need. It's a shorter period of performance, up to 15 months, maximum award, base award of $750,000, and that can be added to through matching funds from government organizations or private industry. And then at the end, you have the different milestones that are your deliverables that you work with your end user and your Air Force customer who signed your MOU for your proposal. And that is going to be all the deliverables that you are putting forward. So without further ado, let's get over to the TPOC introduction. And I'm going to hand this over to Vanessa, who is our TPOC lead.
Hi, good morning. Thank you everybody for coming and joining us today. So what is a TPOC? So you might hear this term used during phase 1, but your technical POC, your technical point of contact, is for phase 1 will be one of our leads. So it might be Major Jared Evans, or it might be Lieutenant Zoe Castrell. Oh, excuse me, Zoe Walters. And they just manage the period of performance for your phase 1. Now, the TPOCs, the government users, your technical POC, will come on board as you are looking for a signature for the MOU, that agreement with a customer. The TPOC is your technical on-site manager, and they're strictly for SBIR, STTR contracts. Who can be a TPOC? Any member interested in implementing technology, right? So this could be any airman or guardian within the Space Force. We just ask that our government users, our customers, have a great attitude. They're committed to the contract throughout the period of performance. And if they do not have knowledge of the SBIR program and what we do here, we hope that they have a willingness to gain it. I make myself available as much as possible to the government users so that we can ensure that they are knowledgeable and understand the level of commitment that will be required throughout. Next slide, please. So what does a TPOC do? TPOC is our government user that is the customer to the company that was awarded the contract. They perform inspection and acceptance of deliverables. We need to make sure that our TPOCs are comfortable doing this. The TPOCs are vary in rank or level of seniority throughout our communities. So you might have a junior enlisted, or you might have a senior military member or civilian that is conducting these duties. But we just need to make sure that all of them are comfortable with the inspection and acceptance of those deliverables that are agreed upon in the MOU. They should monitor the contractor's performance, and we want to ensure that it's successful and that there is a timely delivery of all the deliverables. Coordination is required as well. We are highly reliant on TPOCs and the work that's required at base level, that tactical level, and this may include waivers, security or cybersecurity concerns, flight tests, UAVs, safety, environmental. We all know how important that is to the DoD, and also if your project includes human or animal testing, that your TPOC is comfortable following all the guidelines that are required. And finally, we want our TPOCs to verify the contractor has taken corrective measures and that all the activity is approved. So again, it's a team effort, and we rely on our TPOCs to manage the contract during the period of performance. Okay, next slide. So engagement. Government engagement is necessary to our program. It's a team effort. The TPOCs must be highly involved in the process. We offer many opportunities for our TPOCs to learn what we do and how we are managing the SBIR program. It's imperative that they remain engaged throughout the contract award period. Now, we also understand that military members, there might be a high turnover rate, PCSs, deployments, separations, or you might be changing positions or moving on to something better, but we just ask that you remain engaged, and if you are not able to fulfill the requirements, that you pass it on to somebody else. Next slide. So how do TPOCs engage with companies? Right, so this is our chance to help companies understand our problems, our technical needs, so they can propose the best solution. Communication is key. We should, you can accept their calls, you can accept their emails, and you want to answer the questions as best as possible. Again, they are coming on board to solve your mission needs. Treat them equally, right? We don't want to show favoritism towards one company. Don't give one company more information than others. We want to avoid the bias. Follow rules. Ask your program manager, your CEO, if you have any questions, or your contracting officer, if you have any questions about the best way to handle a situation. If you have any problems, our team is also here to help build a better relationship with the company as we move forward. And then finally, attend our events, get to know our program. The Collider events, a lot of effort goes into all of the events we put in. And they're there for you. They're there to build that bond and also try to find a solution to your problems.
Yes, if I could jump in here, I do want to point out that TPOCs, for engaging companies, there is the formal role of being involved with the phase 2 effort that has been awarded, that you are listed on that customer MOU as a customer end user, as that TPOC for that effort, and interacting with that specific company. But then when it comes to further engagement in a more informal role, it's, keeping an open mind to other solutions that might be out there, and, showing up to the different events to see who else might have acceptable solutions that you could work with. A TPOC is not limited to just working with one company. You can be working with multiple companies. But we do encourage that TPOCs, who are typically former focus area authors and owners, that you continue to engage in the space in addition to your formal role as, managing the effort of the phase 2 that you have sponsored through your customer MOU.
Great, thanks for the input, Amanda. So responsibilities, primary responsibilities for the TPOC includes deliverables. So what is a deliverable? They are contractually required milestones that must be completed. And this is agreed upon before the MOU is signed, and it will be outlined. All of our templates will offer that outline, and the company and the customers come together and decide the best steps to meet the needs of this, to solve the solution, to solve the problem. So again, team effort, you have your companies, you have your TPOCs, and then the execution team. So the companies are responsible for initiating the request for approval. You want to email the completed deliverable and any applicable items to the TPOC and the designated execution mailbox, which will all be outlined as you are awarded a contract. Your TPOCs, this is where you're responsible for promptly recommending approval or rejection of the deliverable. We want you to be confident and in accepting that deliverable. If you're not a problem. You can reject it and just provide a reason why. We see this a few times throughout the week as we're working our executions. Not a problem. We're all professionals. You can resolve the issue and move on. And then finally, behind the scenes, we have the execution team. This is where we review the deliverables and respond to the company with an approval email. And then that's when the invoice will be completed for payment. So FAQs, so our frequently asked questions concerning TPOCs. If you've been working with a phase 1 commercial company looking to submit a phase 2 or D2P2, can I be an AFWERX evaluator? We are always welcoming evaluators, and they are on a volunteer basis, but you cannot evaluate the proposal of a company you have been working with. We want to avoid that conflict of interest. Another one is a commercial company is wanting me to sponsor their phase 2 proposal. Is this allowed? Interested government customers and end users are able to provide input via the customer memorandum, and we provide a template for every solicitation. A business cannot submit a phase 2 proposal without the MOU. They can submit the proposal, but it will not be accepted for evaluation because all the required data isn't available. I have been working with the company as a TPOC on an effort, but I'm changing roles, office assignment. What do I do? Again, with a high turnover rate, we anticipate this, but we want to tackle it as soon as possible. So if you're no longer able to serve as a technical POC, please identify a replacement and contact the team as soon as possible. We have a process outlined in our resources for contracts that are awarded. It's simple. Just make sure that your replacement understands the role that they are taking on and what is required. Another FAQ, I am interested in working with a small business and their SBIR, STTR effort, but I'm unfamiliar with the role of a TPOC, right? So what do I do? And I get this quite a bit. Military members, our customers are apprehensive about signing a document. They are not committing anything other than time. Right, so AFVentures is working to implement training so that all of our TPOCs are better prepared and understand the roles and responsibilities. I am working with a phase 1 company that fits our focus area. Am I the TPOC? Mike Blinsky, you want to take this one on?
Let's see that one. Could you, which question is that again?
I am working with
I'll
the
take
phase.
it, Vanessa.
Okay.
So I know that there's sometimes confusion over the role of TPOC. For a phase 1, if you are a government customer or end user working with the phase 1 company, you are not the TPOC. The TPOC role for phase 1s falls to AFWERX because there's only that initial and final deliverable, and that's for that feasibility study. The role of TPOC going to that customer end user who's working with the company, that comes in phase 2. So if you're working with the phase 1 company, you're not the TPOC for that effort. However, if you are moving forward to phase 2 and they get selected for award, then you will probably be the person that will be taking on that TPOC role and responsibilities. So essentially you would be the one helping them craft that MOU for their phase 2 proposal, but you are not the TPOC for their phase 1 effort. That role starts for phase 2s.
That's correct. And also, because there is a small time lapse from when the proposals are submitted, evaluated, the contracts are awarded, and then there is a notification, sometimes we have the instance where individuals forget they're the technical POC, or they committed to this contract. So if you have that, if you run into that, contact us. We'll get you set up. We'll include you in all the kickoff meetings, which will help. But don't forget, if you become involved, what you've committed to, because it's an ongoing process until the end of the award.
Yeah, Vanessa, this is Mike. If you are the focus area author, the more closely you are associated with your focus area through the phase 1 process, the easier it's going to be when you are designated the TPOC going into the phase 2 process. So we ask you to stay engaged and stay plugged in, because it'll definitely help the transition from phase 1 to phase 2.
Thanks, Mike. That's good advice. And finally, on this page, can I share my TPOC responsibilities? Absolutely. So we encourage that there is a primary and alternate TPOC on that MOU. Sometimes we accept contracts that only have a primary. We advise those primaries to onboard an alternate TPOC for continuity. They can be shared. We can accept deliverables from deliverables approval from the primary or the alternate. And again, for continuity purposes, this is the best thing to do. Contract modifications are not required when we're updating our TPOCs, but everybody must understand the responsibilities they're taking on, and it has to be approved by, or they have to acknowledge that they are taking on the responsibilities.
Yeah, Vanessa, this is Mike again. And one other thing I would touch base with that last point. If you work in a directorate or in an area that has a layer that connects between AFWERX or the CIBR program and yourself, like at the Nuke Weapons Center or someplace, work with them, make them part of your TPOC team, because they're plugged into a lot of the things that are going on within AFWERX and can provide you with other information or documentation that you can get from AFWERX, but they're also being provided with. So make them part of your phase 1 to phase 2 transition TPOC team if they're available. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Vanessa. We're going to get over to the MOU. So if you are looking to submit a phase 2, either from a government perspective, working with a company, or a company submitting a proposal, make sure you pay attention here. So that customer MOU is absolutely required for a CIBR phase 2. If you do not include the customer memorandum, then your proposal will be disqualified and removed from evaluation and consideration. So not only do you have to include the customer MOU, it is a required template that is provided with each solicitation. Do not create your own letter. Don't call it a letter of support. Don't deviate from the template. If the template that is listed within the solicitation is not used, that is also grounds for disqualification. And that's just because we're asking for specific information to be able to compare all proposals to one another for evaluation and then award basis. So also, you need to have 2 signatures on your customer MOU. Presenting a perfectly formatted, templated MOU that only has 1 signature will also result in a disqualification. You need to have the customer and the end user sign your customer MOU. So what's the difference between these two? Customer is the person who is procuring the effort or the product, and then the end user is the person who is using it. So an example that we always go back to is F-16, the pilot is the end user, and the program office that is working the upgrades for that, that would be the customer. In some cases, you might have an instance where the customer and end user are the same person. That can happen if, let's say, the customer is a lab. They would also be using that product as well as procuring it. In that instance, you would have that person sign twice. So you still need 2 signatures. It can be that same person, but they'd be representing the customer and end user. If you have multiple organizations who are interested in working with you on your phase 2, you still only have one MOU. You do not put forward multiple. What happens in cases where you have additional parties that want to be involved is you work with them to have both sides reflected in that MOU, and knowing how you can shape your milestones that are a part of that customer memorandum, making sure that all the stakeholders are happy with the work that is going to be done in that phase 2. In some cases, this might mean having to have one organization be the primary that is really taking charge, who will be the TPOC on the effort, and then other organizations that are more in a background role, watching, observing, being a part of discussions, but not necessarily the one driving the effort. In some cases like this, there might be organizations that are interested in the end result and ability to move to a phase 3 and transition that product if it's prototyped out and found to be successful during the phase 2, but they're not necessarily going to be the one running that phase 2 effort. So why is the customer memorandum needed? What do you put in there? Like, what distinguishes a good customer MOU from one that's not so strong, is answering these questions. Why is this effort relevant? What is it going to do for the end user? What's the impact that is going to be had on the Air Force if it's successful? And then this is the time where that customer and end user really get to put their voice to the proposal that the company is putting together. And they can also talk about what is the plan to transition the technology. If you have a transition plan, if you know how you're going to take a successful effort and incorporate it into a weapon system or a platform or transition that technology, if you have that plan, if you have the funding, if you know how you're going to move forward and you can verbalize that, that's going to make a much stronger customer memorandum. And then the last part of customer memorandums are the milestones. So what are milestones? They're agreed upon expectations and essentially your deliverables for the period of performance. So the first milestone is the same for everybody. It should be verbatim what is shown in the template. And that is to enable us to pay you a set percentage 2 weeks into the program, so you get a first check. Everything there on out is up to the business and the DoD customer and end user. So when you are working with a small business on an effort and you're looking at what they want to do in a phase 2, make sure that it's lining up with what is going on in your organization. If you want to be ready for perhaps an exercise where maybe their products can be integrated, make sure that that is built into their timeline, that they know about it and that they know what they need to be hitting. If certain approvals need to be met, then those should be milestones that are included within that customer memorandum. So essentially, all the milestones that are listed that are agreed upon between the government and industry, that is what is going to be used for the phase 2 contract and what will be awarded. And that is then what the company will be held to as far as their performance standard and what is expected for their deliverables. So speaking of invoicing and deliverables, we're going to move into this next section, and we have some of our experts, Mike and Vanessa. I might call on you to hop in here and provide some insight. So stop me if you have anything in addition to add, and we'll get started. So deliverable, we had discussed this a little bit before. For phase 1s, it's your initial report and final report. Nothing very complicated here. For phase 2s, effort to effort, it's going to look different based upon what you put in your milestone schedule and how that translates over into the contract. So it's perfectly acceptable for customers and end users to shape that phase 2 like we just talked about, and making sure that the milestones represent the work and the effort that you want this small business to be working on. So questions to ask when you're putting this together is, what do you want the phase 2 to achieve? What benchmarks should the company be aware of? And what might be necessary for integration and accomplishing the prototype for your organization? And When they accomplish a deliverable in accordance with that schedule, that is when they submit for payment for approval from the TPOC and then payment. So when you submit a deliverable, there are often errors that hopefully we can address here and make sure that we have a better understanding of how to submit a deliverable, and which ultimately leads to payment. So now companies, let's talk about the steps that you need to follow. One, accomplish the work in accordance with that milestone schedule. When that work is accomplished, then you submit the deliverable to the TPOC and AFWERX for approval. So both of those. And that once they receive the acceptance, that is when you go and submit the invoice. Do not preempt it. Don't submit the invoice before you submit the deliverable or at the same time as you send the deliverable. Wait for that approval. If you submit the invoice early, that's going to result in delays and perhaps kickbacks in the system, which is just going to delay the payment for you. Things to keep in mind that multiple CLINs or the line of efforts, they can be submitted on one invoice. And then once the deliverable is accepted and the invoice is in the system, we have 30 days to accept and invoice the payment. Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I put over in the chat window, if you guys are looking over there, just some of the guidelines of what we have up on our union page as well. So some of the most common mistakes, believe it or not, you know, I get a lot of people submitting these requests for deliverables and they won't put the contract information in, or, you know, the contract number, something like that. So just make sure that you know in all the correspondence that you have with us, that you put in that contract number and what deliverable it is that you're requesting, and make sure obviously that you're sending that not only to us but out to the TPOCs. They're the ones that are actually doing the approval for it. Then that'll come back into us once it's approved by the TPOC. And again, making sure, you know, that we keep that information of the invoice number in that subject line so that we can process it. We have over 735, I believe, active phase 2 contracts now. So you can tell, you know, there's a lot of, we have to stop and try to go look up who that company is that has that particular contract number. If you could put all that information in the subject line, it definitely helps to push it along. And I think that's it from here. Over.
Thank you. I appreciate that input. And then on the TPOC side, there's some important steps that you would take. So when the company submits their deliverable, it's up to you whether it is accepted or rejected. So don't just accept something if it's not up to speed, if it's not what was agreed upon, if it's not what is on that milestone. You are the one that is essentially authorizing that, yes, the work was completed as expected and that we, the government, should be paying. So make sure that you are accepting accordingly because that is a big responsibility. And while rejections can and do occur, you can cut down on the likelihood of a rejection by working closely with that small business throughout the period of performance. So if you know what they're doing and you have open lines of communication, a rejection shouldn't be a surprise. You shouldn't get to a rejection because things should be on time and executed as expected.
Amanda, I might just add to that as well. So as TPOCs, when you guys are approving those deliverables, please make sure, you know, that you and the SBC, the small business concern, who's submitting that you are the TPOC of record. So you may be on the MOU, maybe the end customer, but you may not be in every case the TPOC. So we get the onboarding information when the small businesses first sign up in our online system and our ecosystem, and they let us know who the TPOCs are on those particular contracts. So make sure, especially on those first couple of deliverables that you're approving, that you are the TPOC of record on that. Over.
Yes, absolutely. That's extremely important. And that's also why when TPOCs change, that it's important to let us know so that we can make the adjustments to the contract so that we have the correct person represented as the TPOC. All right, so we talked about the email that you need to send as the small business to essentially notify your TPOC and AFWERX of your deliverable. So this is a template that you will use. This is posted on Union. This is then what the TPOC will reply to with that recommendation of approve or reject. And then that thread is then what AFWERX uses to go into the invoicing and approve the invoice. So we'll move over to that here. So invoicing, wide area workflow. What is invoicing? Essentially, that is how contractors submit for payment. Wide area workflow, or WAF, is the platform that is used to submit an invoice and to, on the government side, approve and pay out on invoices. Once an invoice is submitted, our team has 30 days to accept the invoice payment. Any error in submission, we kind of discussed this with Mike, that can delay the payment or result in rejection from the invoice system. And then you have to go back in and then that 30 days starts over. So making sure you submit properly is really key. And then making sure you don't submit before the deliverable approval is received, because again, we'd have to go in and reject that in wide area workflow and then have you put in the invoice after the deliverable approval. So here are some helpful hints on things that we sometimes see as wrong. Contract number type, that's the contract type. Most awards is going to be the DoD contract FAR. Sometimes for phase twos, there can be a possibility of another agreement. However, that's going to be in your contract. So you can reference your contracts and then see what contract type is listed. And that's what you're going to use for contract number type. For product service, you'll select AC32. Most warnings that come in the system you can ignore unless it gives you a hard stop. And then when you see receiving report required, that just means that the government, you're waiting on the government to accept the invoice and you don't have to do anything further. It kind of is worded like you need to submit some type of report. Don't worry about that. Essentially, at receiving that, the ball is in our court. You can submit deliverables early, and you can also submit deliverables out of order from what is listed on your milestone schedule. Of course, that's something that you would be coordinating with your TPOC, that they would be aware of and that they'd be ready for approving those early deliverables, or sometimes, you know, maybe an exercise date changes, and so deliverables are then submitted out of order. That's acceptable as long as all of that is coordinated. So
Hey, Amanda, just a quick point on that as well, if you don't mind. So when you're putting in those out of order deliverables are something that's out of the norm. So we have a tracking mechanism, a tracking spreadsheet where we're matching off all those as they come in. If you could kind of just give us a little bit of a heads up, maybe you're looking at doing deliverable number 8 and you know you hadn't done 4, 5, and 6 or 7 or something like that. If you could just let us know, hey, you know, a little note in there, hey, I know this is a little bit out of order. That way, you know, it's not a surprise to us when we're going over there and cross-referencing it on our checkoff sheet as well. So that'd be helpful for us as we're actually processing on our side. Over. Thank
you. I appreciate that. And then Mike had talked a little bit about common reasons for rejections. Other are putting down the wrong price, the wrong description, wrong unit of measure. Again, going to keep hitting on this, submitting the invoice before having the deliverable approval. Don't do it. That's the most common that we see, and it causes delays and then nobody's happy. And submitting information off of the work plan instead of what was listed on the contract. Contract is your Bible. Go off the contract. That is the final word and say.
Amanda, before you go on, somebody posted a great question. I thought this is an appropriate time to bring it up. So do TPOCs have any association with wide area workflow during the period of performance? So go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to just say it is our team that currently goes in and submits the invoice payment. So we rely upon that approval from the TPOC, but the TPOC, at least currently, it is not the one going into a wide area workflow.
Yeah, this is Mike again. So under the current ecosystem that we're doing through the AFWERX, at least on the phase 2 execution side, a wide area workflow is now being executed. We have a POC person, Brett Kaiser, who is now entering all those into wide area workflow for us. So none of the TPOCs, I know during the past, TPOCs used to be trained, and they actually executed their own wide area workflow and approvals at that point. But through the AFWERX current ecosystem and phase 2 execution, we're doing all that now through our POC contact, Brett Kaiser. Over.
Thank you for that background. I actually didn't know that. I also see just a quick admin thing here. There are some questions being asked in the chat. I would ask that you ask your questions in the Q&A portion of this. That way all the Q&As get recorded. If they're not answered live, we do go back on the back end and answer the Q&As, and then we'll send them out to the participants, and eventually it will get updated into our FAQs on the AFWERX website.
Also, Amanda, if they need to, we're throwing some stuff over there in that chat window. If there's something of interest, just reach over there and grab a copy. And I think we'll try to stay on long enough to give you guys an opportunity to grab things out of that chat window if you need it. But we're posting some stuff up there that I think will be helpful as well.
Yeah, feel free, what we put in the chat from our team, feel free to copy that and paste it over into a document that you have open on your desktop. So, all right, moving on here. So for the contractor, again, this is going to be glue before this is over. Do not submit an invoice until your deliverable approval is received. Doing so is just going to result in payment delays because we'll have to reject it, then you have to put it in again. And so just don't cause that headache for yourself. 2, if you have approval for multiple CLINs, only submit one invoice with the multiple CLINs. CLINs are also just the term that we use for that milestone deliverable. So each of the milestone sections that are listed out, those get copied over to the contract as CLINs. So essentially these terms are the same for the purpose here. And then don't ask for invoice status unless it's close to that 30-day window. As Mike said, we have over 700 companies that are constantly submitting different deliverables. That's just in phase 2. We also have our phase 1s that we have to balance with this as well for those approvals. So when we receive a bunch of emails asking for status and updates, then we have to go in and look and see, oh, are we close to that 30-day window? Did someone not do something, only find out it was submitted yesterday? And now we just wasted, 30 minutes digging up a particular invoice and taking time away from going through. We do work invoices as approvals are received. So, sometimes approvals and invoice or deliverables are submitted all at the same time. For example, that initial first deliverable that is the same on every milestone schedule. That's going to mean 700 companies going through and trying to get payment. So just keep that in mind, that there are hundreds that we're working through. And during other events such as award sprints, the contract awards are priority. And so in that case, invoicing can get a little backlogged, but our team does work within that 30 days. So please be patient and know that we are keeping to the standard and requirement of submitting the invoice payment within the 30-day window.
Hey, Amanda, it's Mike again. So I'm trying to push some stuff out over into the chat window. It's not coming through, but we got some great learning opportunities up on our union site. I don't know if all you folks have access to that right now on the phase 2 execution union side, but we have videos where it talks about how to enter stuff into the wide area workflow and how-to guides. I'm going to post that link up there for those of you that have access to that. Over.
Yeah, absolutely. For the companies who have joined us today or will watch this webinar recording in the future, Union, if you're onboarded, is a great resource. You can ask questions, you can collaborate with other businesses. Sometimes actually small businesses talking to one another helps out our team because you guys are often pretty well educated in the way that this works, and you can help out some of the newer companies that are on the Union platform. But that is a great resource that we will always direct you towards. If you are part of an awarded effort, then you'll have access to Union. So at this point, we are at questions. So I'll be trying to see if I can pull up Q&A. I never seem to be able to when I'm presenting. Vanessa, you might need to help me out.
Okay, so we have several questions about the MOU. So if Raycon is still on, I think these would be good for you to answer, sir. So several questions about the MOU is where can they find the 21.2 MOU?
It should be an attachment with the commercial solution opening or the solicitation that we put out.
Yep, and I will try to get the link in there. When will there be an MOU? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Right now, the current one that's out there is not the final one, but it's going to be put out pretty soon.
Okay, good to know. So we have Alan who had asked, when will there be an MOU template for 21.2 D2P2, and where can we search for it? So Ray just answered where we can find it.
So for 21.2, there is the phase 2 solicitation that will be specific for the phase 1 cohort companies that are trying to make that transition. So that's for the 20.3 phase 1s. That phase 2 solicitation will be posted, but there is not a D2P2 for 21.2.
Great. And there was also another one from Jonathan who thanked you, Ray. If they decide to keep it separate, 2 MOUs, 1 MOU, do we recommend 2 MOUs?
So for that one, yeah, just the one MOU.
Yeah, I already typed up an answer for them. And that, you know, to me, it's like a great opportunity for 2 Air Force customers to get together and synergize their efforts with you. So I would, if you can, put the 2 Air Force customers in touch with each other and let them discuss how they want to proceed with that MOU. But to me, that's a great opportunity for you.
Yes, and then I would also say this isn't necessarily listed or advertised, but if you have, let's say, other interested parties who aren't at the point of taking the step of signing a customer MOU and officially being the TPOC and everything, but maybe they're interested, you can still submit that kind of interest support. But that just won't count for anything if you don't have an MOU. So you need the MOU, but if you have an MOU with a customer or customers that are working together on your milestone efforts, and then you have some maybe side interest, either from industry or from government who aren't working on that particular proposed effort as your customer and end user, you can still include those letters of support. There is a distinguishing factor. You need the MOU, but you still have that other option in addition to the MOU.
Great, thank you. So we had several questions about our recordings. Amanda, do you want to tell the audience where they can find all our recordings?
So I know that this has been asked in the last couple sessions, and we hadn't yet cleared our PA process for posting. Right now, the first 2 webinar sessions and recordings and the slides are available on the AFWERX website. We are also in the process of standing up a page on the AFWERX website to have those same webinar recordings accessible. That is not yet live, but live, active right now. You can go to the AFWERX website and The webinar page has the previous webinar recording as well as slides. So last week's webinar recording is still going through the editing process, but the slides are already available. And then once we have the Q&As fully answered, we'll be adding that probably to that same space, as well as to the AFWERX FAQ site. In addition, any Q&As that we answer after this session, we do send them out to everybody who has signed up or registered for the event. All right, what other questions are out there?
So we had a question from Rob. Can you elaborate on what working with a company means? What if the staff, and it involves, can Air Force staff can be an AFWERX volunteer evaluator, but not for a company they have been working with? What if the staff has only been discussing the applicability of the tech solution, but is not working with a contact?
So as far, let's discuss the evaluation side of things first. So you always want to be safer than sorry when it comes to evaluations and conflicts of interest and acquisitions ethics. So if you have had conversations with a company, you can still be an evaluator. You just can't evaluate that company's proposal. So that is the qualifier there. You can evaluate, 50 other proposals, but if you are assigned a proposal that of a company that you have had discussions with, then you would want to recuse yourself from that evaluation. No problem. We just reassign it to somebody else. And then during the evaluation selection process, where evaluators can go through and choose particular proposals that they'd like to evaluate based upon their area of expertise and technology interests, make sure you're not choosing a company that you have worked with. Again, that is an acquisitions ethics issue and a conflict of interest, and you don't want to land yourself in hot water. So but you're still welcome to be an overall AFWERX evaluator. As far as working with a company, if you have a focus area or you are someone who's looking for solutions or capabilities, there is essentially the higher level of engagement that can be considered more like market research. Talking with companies, seeing what their technology, what their capabilities are that could be offered to you, and your program, your weapon system, your mission. That is one level of engagement. But then when you're talking about working with a company for their phase 1 or phase 2 effort, that's really more, hand-in-hand discussion saying, hey, we're interested in you. We believe your product offers something of value for us. Let's now see where we can take this. Having more discussions about your mission set and your capabilities and your pain points and what is their idea on how to tackle some of those capability gaps. So that would be, next level discussion. So you can do your shotgun approach of talking to multiple companies and seeing what technologies are out there. But then there's, targeting down or narrowing the field to see which maybe 1 or 2, 3 companies do you want to work with more hand in hand on a phase 2 effort. I don't know if that fully answered your question. If not, you can respond in the Q&A.
Hey, Amanda, this is Mike Williams. So we have another question over here. It's a good question. I'm going to punt it over to Ray, though. I think Ray knows the answer to this. It's asking on the MOU, is it required for the STTR phase 2 as well? I believe it is, but Ray, can you confirm that?
I'm 99% sure it is required for all our phase 2 sitters, AFWERX phase 2 sitters.
Great. Hope that helps.
Our sitters, I should say, sitters and sitters.
Correct.
All right.
We do have one more question about the MOU. Can some of the points from the MOU template be removed to simplify it for customers?
No. So they can provide minimal answers if they'd like to, or answer how they would like, but we require the MOU to be complete.
Right. If a section maybe doesn't apply, you can put NA, but don't remove it. Don't alter the template itself.
Right, and they've done a great job. It appears overwhelming at first glance, but our team has done a good job of breaking up on what's required and the areas that are applicable, the fill out as needed.
Yeah, and there's example text in there as well to give people an idea of what kind of information we're looking for throughout the sections of the MOU. So yes, when you first look at it, it looks quite daunting, but break it down section by section, and it's actually not as bad as it looks on first appearance.
Yeah, most MOUs, once completely filled out, are around 3 to 4 pages. So it just depends on how much you've got information you have at the moment of doing the MOU. So they don't end up being very long documents.
Right, and remember that the customer MOU, this is the government's input to the company's proposal. So as someone who's working with a company who has an interest in seeing this effort get selected and succeed, this is where you can lend your voice to that. That is not a conflict of interest. It's completely legal to do, with the caveat of so long as you're not going on and trying to be the evaluator for that proposed effort. So you can give your input. You can say this is the greatest technology ever. That's all legal. You can do that. That's the point of the customer memorandum. All right, do we have any other questions? I saw the count go up.
Saw another MOU question, Ray, that's interesting. So they're talking about, this obviously these folks are in phase 1, and they're asking about, does AFWERX still have TPOCs if there's multiple interested parties, other agencies within the SBA program who are interested in that technology? Do we need to have multiple places for MOUs from those different agencies over?
No, all we need is one MOU from one Air Force customer. It has to be, so when you talk about multiple agencies or DoD customers, since it's an Air Force SBIR program, your Air Force customer and user have to be Air Force. Now you can have other organizations involved, but we require the MOU to be signed by Air Force people, at least people representing Air Force customers or Air Force users.
Exactly. So don't forget, this is an Air Force portion or branch of the SBIR program. SBIR is not unique to AFWERX or the Air Force. It is across all government or a lot of government organizations. So if in your customer MOU, let's say your unit also is working with the Army and the Army has an interest, you can have that in there. You can have the Army representatives provide some input as well, although the Air Force will be the one signing it with their interest. That is also where you can have letters of support, maybe say from NASA or the Navy, some other organization that might not be involved as that TPOC because they're not Air Force, but they'd be able to show that there's a larger government interest out there in use case scenarios.
Thank you, Amanda and Ray. We have a question from a phase 1 customer. We were awarded a phase 1 in 20.1. Can we apply for a phase 2 under 21.2?
So when you're awarded a phase 1, that phase 1 cohort will receive its own solicitation for phase 2s. So when that phase 1 period of performance concludes, they'll be able to propose to that solicitation. So that's not released yet. Right now we have the phase 2 solicitation for the 20.3 cohort, which is concluding their period of performance. The 21.1 phase 1s, they are just starting their period of performance, and so you can expect in roughly 3 months the solicitation will be available for their phase 2 proposal. So you would wait for that one.
Yeah, in addition, so let's say, I mean, not every phase one civver can complete their period of performance in time, or finds their customer in time to apply for their specific phase two cohort. So there is an option to apply for a D2, a direct to phase two, if you've missed your window. That is going to be a little bit more difficult because during that application for the direct to phase two, you're going to have to provide information on a phase one feasibility study that does not relate to your phase one work. So it has to be new work that is outside your phase, the work of your phase one civver. So that's why it becomes a little bit more complicated and difficult, and you have to prove that case. I am having some discussions about potentially seeing if we could make some other adjustments, but right now they're just an initial discussion. So, but that's your only options right now. You either apply during your specific cohort, or you can go for a direct to phase two, but then your phase one feasibility study must be separate from your phase one civver work.
All right, we have about 5 more minutes until we conclude this webinar. Are there any other or new questions that are out there?
Let's see, a great new question that just came up. It asks, can current phase two awarded company participate in the CSO pitch days? And can we use it for TAC buy if we win a pitch?
So anytime you're putting in an additional effort, it has to be a different scope. So has to be different R&D, different solution, different scope in order to receive multiple awards. You can have, a phase two and a phase one, as long as they're completely separate. You can have 2 separate phase twos, that's okay. Again, it comes down to the scope of what you are doing and making sure that it is separate R&D. Essentially, government should not be paying twice for the same product or the same research. And then for TAC-FI, Strat-FI, you have to be a phase two in order to qualify for that program. And you also cannot have received a phase two follow-on award. And if you have, then that would not qualify for Strat-FI, TAC-FI.
Great information, Amanda. So we have a few more questions I think I can consolidate concerning MOU. Does the weight of the senior member signing the MOU, concurring, does that matter in selection?
So there is no weight given in the evaluations process to the rank of the person who signs the MOU. However, I would say if you have a senior leader just signing it, it's not going to be worth much. If you have a senior leader saying that this is my number 1, number 2 priority, then that could mean something. So it's, again, the content of what is stated in the MOU. It's not the signature. So go for the content. And if you have a senior leader saying that this is my number 1, or that they're committed to this, or that they have funding to put towards this if it's successful, then that will carry more weight than just having a standard MOU that doesn't have any of those weighted statements behind it and having a senior leader signature. So rank itself does not matter.
And then along with that, if every C-130, C-17 airlift wing is a potential user, who would be the customer who procures it?
So perhaps the PEO, someone in the program office would be the customer. If you're working with the end user, if you're working with the flying squadron, say, then they should know who their acquisitions office is. And then that would be your customer. So every case is different. So if you're working with the end user, your end user should know at some level, might not be a junior enlisted airman, but within that user organization, someone should know who is in charge of their procurement and who's their customer.
Thank you.
All right, so we're just about at 1 o'clock. Thank you all for joining us today. If we didn't get to your question, we will be tackling them and getting them integrated on the back end, so everyone's questions will be answered. The webinar recording will be posted on the Ask Silver Sitter website, and you can find the first 2 webinars posted there. The slides will be there as well. And then we are also working on having that information posted on the AFWERX website so that you can check it out there as well. So again, thank you all for joining. That's all that we have for you today. Join us next week. I believe our discussion is going to be the StratFi TechFi program. So next Thursday, StratFi TechFi, and then hopefully we can see you there. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for your time.